John Jones called us last night and retired. John Jones is officially retired. Tom Aspinall is the heavyweight champion of the UFC.
This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. Some smart person probably. Yes, ladies, gentlemen, and everything in between. Tom Aspinall is officially the best fighter on the planet. Lock this man in a room with someone and I know who walks out.
If you, John and Dana go into a room together, who leaves first?
Depends what's going on in there, doesn't it? Depends what's going on, what they're up to, Dana and John. Because I might leave if them two are up to something.
So, as you all probably know, the UFC held its first event in Azerbaijan on Saturday night. And it seems like pretty much no one gives one about what went on at the actual event because everyone wants to know what happened about John Jones and the bombshell that was dropped by Dana White at the post-fight press conference. Anyway, now that my GOAT Tom Aspinall is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, I think it's time that we start to look forward to see which possible opponents he should fight next, and whether he'll go down as one of the best heavyweights of all time, or even the greatest fighter of all time. More on that later. Now, let's start by looking at who would be a good first title defence for Aspinall. Personally, I think Tom could fight anyone from Cyril Gane, Alexander Volkov, Jailton Almeida, Alex Pereira, or even the returning Francis Ngannou, my personal favourite option because I feel like it finally makes up for the lacklustre state of the heavyweight division, since Francis left to star in the real-life Rocky adaptation. Although, imagine how dead the heavyweight division would be if Ngannou came back and not only beat Tom Aspinall but then retired. I bet Dana White would try and shut down the division like he nearly did with flyweight. But look at it this way. Aspinall vs Ngannou is the nearest thing we're ever going to get in terms of hype and excitement to the John Jones matchup itself, and Baldy himself never actually said that Ngannou couldn't come back.
Open to having Francis back.
He would consider coming back to UFC if what? One thing I've learned over the years about Francis doesn't always mean what he says publicly. What he says behind the scenes are different than what he says publicly. I'm not a big fan. I would be shocked if Francis ever came back here.
I would really love to see Aspinall versus Ngannou, and I think most people can agree that it's the most exciting matchup out of the five I spoke about earlier, but it is also one of the most unlikely given how much Dana likes to hold a grudge. Hopefully though, the UFC can put all egos aside and make this matchup. Other than that, there isn't really anyone else that excites me as much. Gane and Volkov are in a weird mid-ground where Gane technically just beat Volkov in a number one contenders matchup, but he probably should have lost that fight so he doesn't deserve a title shot, but neither does Volkov because although he should have beaten Gane, he has already lost to Tom Aspinall in under a round. The only other intriguing contender in the heavyweight division is Jailton Almeida, although he's currently ranked outside of the top 5, and even though that's probably going to change following John's retirement, it still feels like he should be one win away from fighting from the belt. But there's always a matchup with former middleweight and light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira, which has been rumoured to happen for pretty much every major UFC card since Pereira hinted at moving up to heavyweight. Obviously, if Alex is to win this fight, he will become the first UFC triple champ, but I personally see Aspinall as an extremely tough test for the Charminator over here, and although he's shown many improvements in his takedown defence in recent fights, was also taken down by Adesanya and Blachowicz only 6 or 7 fights ago. Regardless of who takes on Tom in their next fight, I don't see many other fighters giving him too much trouble. Ngannou is nowhere near as good on the ground as Aspinall, and despite improving his boxing, seems like the less technical of the two. Gane has been out-wrestled by pretty much every fighter in the UFC, and Volkov already got his arm twisted by Tom in about 3 minutes. Almeida is probably the hardest fight based on how good his grappling has looked, but his chin has looked questionable at times, while his fellow Brazilian Alex Pereira is pretty much the opposite and would probably get rugby tackled in the first round.
The bell would go and I'd run across, full blast and rugby tackling is what I'd do.
Apart from these 5 guys, no, not the burgers Shamil, it's quite hard to see anyone actually coming close to Tom during his title reign. I personally foresee fighters like Talison Teixeira, Aldo Cortez Acosta, Mario Pinto and my GOAT Shamil Gaziev climbing to the top of the rankings, but they all seem fairly untested so it's quite hard to say how far they'll really make it. Teixeira is taking on Derek Lewis in less than a month's time, so that'll be an interesting step up in competition for the undefeated cousin of Goliath himself. Although Waldo Cortez Acosta is apparently fighting Sergey Pavlovich in China, so seems like he's the nearest out of these 4 prospects to getting a title shot. But the latter 2 out of these up-and-comers seems like the more intriguing to me. Mario Pinto is undefeated and just fought in March of this year, so I'd love to see him take on fellow Englishman Mick Parkin in his next fight, who also trains with Tom Aspinall, so maybe there could be some sort of storyline that could emerge out of that. Pinto seems like quite a promotable guy and he represents a couple of different countries, so I could see the UFC trying to push him as the new heavyweight star. Plus, a matchup between Aspinall and Pinto seems like the nearest thing we're ever going to get to Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua over in the world of boxing, so at least I can tell my grandchildren that that fight happened. As well as this, the People's Champion Shamil Gaziev is probably one of the biggest, no pun intended, and most popular stars out of the lot that are up and coming at heavyweight, so it's not too unrealistic to imagine that the UFC might want to capitalise on the memes and give him an easy path to the title. After these guys make it to the top 5, however, I really don't see what else is left for Tom Aspinall. Light heavyweights like Magomed Ankalaev or Jamal Hill could move up, however. Ankalaev will be taking on either Alex Pereira or Yuri Prochazka in his next fight, so if he is to go on and beat one or both of those dominantly, we could see a similar skill gap to like what Tom has at heavyweight. So a move up could be a good idea, while Jamal Hill spoke about wanting to chase double champ status prior to his fight at UFC 300. Even though he's on a 3-fight losing streak since then, I'd still love to see him change weight class, since Tom would be able to take on more former champions and could deepen his resume. Despite all of these different challenges though, I really do see Tom Aspinall reigning across the heavyweight division for a long time. If anyone was going to beat him, it probably would have been Jones, although having watched his fights against Dominic Reyes and Stipe Miocic, John's recent form hasn't looked extremely impressive and is a far fall from grace from his previous young talented self. I think it's safe to say that Tom has the skills to go down as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, considering the record for most consecutive title defences is only 3, which is not very much. But can he become one of the greatest fighters to ever do it? I think so. If he was able to beat most, if not all of these names that I've just mentioned, he would have wins over former champs like Francis Ngannou, Pereira, Ankalaev and Hill, as well as wins over perennial contenders such as Gane and Volkov, plus young prospects like Teixeira, Cortez Acosta, Pinto and Gaziev. The most legacy defining wins out of these would be the Francis or Pereira fights, so I'd like to see these matchups be made, but a long title reign over a shallow division has managed to secure Demetrius Johnson a place in my top 5, so who's to say that Tom can't join that upper echelon too. Overall, it's sad to have lost the John Jones fight, but I think we can all agree that it's good to get some life in the division, and that maybe, just maybe, Tom will go on to exceed what John has done down at light heavyweight anyway, and could go down as the greatest of all time, having retired John Jones without even fighting him.
Until he retires, because there's no way on earth that he's going to fight me. Not a chance. I will retire John Jones without even fighting him.